Today, we have everyday resiliency for people living with Parkinson's and their care partners, done by Judy Long. And right now, what I'd like to do is get right to it and spotlight Judy so she can introduce herself and start to get going in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thanks to all of you for welcoming me to join you today for your Lunch and Learn. It's really good to meet you briefly. I am Judy Long, as it probably says on my screen, and I am a palliative care chaplain at UCSF in San Francisco, where I worked for the last 8 years in an outpatient clinic that was for people with advanced Parkinson's and related disorders. And because it was palliative care, I'm not sure how many of you know that term very well, but palliative care means it's anyone who has a serious illness and their family members. So when we would see people in our clinic, it wasn't just the person living with Parkinson's or whatever the related disorder might have been, but it was also seeing their family members. So I'm really happy to hear that. I don't know which of you is which, but I'm happy to hear that we've got a mix of people here. I think that's great. And the last thing I'll say about myself, just so you're aware of it, is that I also am an educator, so I do some teaching. And the two courses that I teach currently are one that is for care partners, that is called Sustainable Caregiving for people that are care partners of people with neurologic illness or people with serious illness. I teach both of those. And then for people that are living with a serious illness, I teach a separate course that is Resiliency for people living with serious illness or people living with neurologic illness. So the neurologic illness and serious illness courses alternate. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know that. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today comes to some degree out of the things that I've found are evidence-based practices that can help to strengthen us right in the middle of things that are hard in many different ways. Sometimes it's how can I calm my emotions when things are stressful, or how can you can put a blank behind it. So there are a number of subjects and themes that I teach. But for today, what I'd like to do, and this is a little different for me, as those of you that have ever seen me teach will know, I don't usually talk the whole time, but I get to talk the whole time with you guys. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So it won't be too terribly long. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I mean by resiliency, since we are talking about or I have chosen to call this talk today, Everyday Resiliency. So that's a word we all use and know. It's not a surprise. And I think rather than going to Q&A now, since that'll go to the end, I'll just tell you what I mean by it so you'll know where I'm coming from. So when I'm saying resilience or resiliency, I'm talking about what is our capacity to bounce back to some degree, to recover from setbacks. And I would say it's part of being human to have setbacks. We all have them all the time. And what is it that strengthens our capacity to recover after a setback, to kind of come back and get back on our feet, our, metaphorical feet if we're not standing, but what is it that helps us get back on our feet so that we can continue on with what we want to be doing in our lives instead of just getting knocked down? And of course, as I would imagine every one of you knows, there are countless ways. There are countless things for me that strengthen me, that help me get back on my feet when I have a setback. And I would guess that's probably true for every one of you. And I would also guess some of those things might be the same as the things I would go to, and some might be quite different, because we all have our own personal history of what works for us. So even before I say anything else, I'd like to just encourage you to continue to notice and find what works for you, what strengthens you when something's hard. And because it's a personal question, meaning not the royal you, that's everyone, but you individually, what really helps you? It's really great if we can know what that is. And then we can intentionally notice if we're getting stressed or upset and turn to what works for us. So, if I didn't say anything else today, I'd figure that would be enough. So I will give you a few minutes a little later on to think a little bit about those things. Oh, if it's convenient for you and you don't mind doing this, I'd love for you to have a paper and pencil or a paper and pen handy, if you're comfortable writing. If not, then if you're if there are two people in the room, have one of them do the writing, one of them do the remembering. So whatever works for you. You don't need to take notes. It's just there will be one or two times where if I ask you to think about things that strengthen you, sometimes it's helpful to jot a couple of them down so you can just see them on a piece of paper. I'm not going to ask you to do much writing, I promise. I'm going to interrupt my flow because what I'd like to talk about is what I mean by resiliency, or rather specifically, what I have learned can strengthen our resiliency. Before I do that, I just want to just state a sentence that I will come back to, and it's this. If we can notice what's happening without getting totally emotionally lost in the story of what's going on in our lives, if we can just notice what's happening, then that gives us a little bit of space in which to choose how we're going to respond. For some of us, that would be a piece of cake. But for most of us, myself included, I would say that's a challenge, right? I don't do that. I just get busy being whatever the emotion is. And I don't stop to notice that I'm having the emotion. I'm just busy being whatever, frustrated, angry, upset. So we can do all that. We can still do it. There's no reason not to have emotions. That's a good thing. They're there for probably a very good reason. But I can also be aware that it's happening, right? I can be frustrated and I can go, oh, this is frustration. That's what's happening. So our ability to notice, even while we're feeling it, that gives us a chance to choose what we want to do next. So that's an overarching idea. So just hang with that one. And then I'll move forward into these so-called elements of resiliency. And of course, there are millions of them. I'm just going to mention three kind of umbrella ideas that have a lot of research behind them. And I found them to be useful. So I've used them myself. I've taught them to others. And at this point, I'm just going to mention them to you. And then we'll try out a couple practices, but we're not going to try to go at length in any one of these. So realize I'm just mentioning them for starters. So one of the factors or elements, call it what you will, is this idea of having some sort of a purpose in our lives that is for the greater good, whatever that means to you. It might be taking care of your family. It might be the word love. It might be teaching. It might be being a medical provider. Maybe people in this group have been in service industries. It might be, and that could be anything, right? That could be accounting. That could be anything that you're doing for someone else's well-being. But is there something within your own life and in your own heart and mind that is for the good of others as well as yourself? And interestingly, I'll come back to that, but interestingly, research shows that when I do something really good for someone else, it also benefits me. Isn't that interesting? It not only benefits me emotionally, it benefits me physically. I think that's just a wonderfully encouraging and hopeful and inspirational idea. So I'd like to come back to it. There are various ways we can practice it, but that's the idea. The second umbrella element of resiliency, or how we strengthen it, is connection. You might go, why would I say that? Why would anyone say it? But I'd like to ask you or invite you to consider connection in contrast to isolation. So it's been my experience working in hospital with people with neurologic illness as well as people with advanced cancers that it's fairly natural for many, not all, I will not say this is true for all of you, but I would say a majority perhaps of people, it's very natural to sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, to isolate ourselves. And in movement disorders and Parkinson's and related disorders, that can be heightened by the illness itself. Maybe some of that happens because our mobility has been impaired. Our ability to communicate may have been impaired. And we may wind up connecting with people a lot less than we used to. Sometimes it's caused by just finding we're not doing the same things we used to do. We can't get out as easily. By the way, yes, I know it's COVID, but I'll just say even without COVID, that would be true. There can be an inclination to kind of pull back a little. Parkinson's also has built within it, and many of you would already know this, sometimes something that impels us towards apathy, even if we've normally been a very engaged and involved person. So if that's there, that's there. I'm not saying we're going to do something magic to make it go away. But if we can notice, coming back, if I notice I can choose, if I notice that I'm becoming a little more isolated than might be good for me, if it's becoming what the researchers like to call chronic, if it becomes chronic, that's the only time it's a problem, then maybe I want to think about how do I counter that? What do I do? Do I do something proactively to connect with other people? Now, some of you have that built in by nature of your families or your neighborhoods, your churches, your community centers. Some people don't. Some people, even that have it built in, can begin to distance themselves a little. So I just would ask you, hold that in your awareness. It's very important. And then the third area, and you may laugh at me with this one, it's control, having some choice about things, some sense of self-efficacy, as opposed to helplessness. Now, please know, and I'm sure you do know this, I don't think that there's a magic wand or a silver bullet that I can use that will make anything I don't like go away. I wish there were, but I haven't found that yet. If you found it, let me know. I'd like to learn it. But interestingly, there are nonetheless some small things that turn out to be important things that I can choose that will really help me to navigate the illness I'm living with. And even if I weren't ill, they would help me in navigating my life and bringing more of the quality I want to what I'm doing. Whether it's something as simple as a grounding practice when I feel stressed. So at least I've got a little bit of choice about whether I'm going to blow up or whether I'm going to help myself to simmer down a little bit if I choose to. Don't have to. Let me sidestep for a minute just to say, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't sometimes blow up. Sometimes that's the right thing to do. Sometimes we should have a good cry. Sometimes we should do a lot of things. But I like to know that I have a choice. That if I don't want to be doing some of those things, that I have another way I can respond. And I can choose it if I wish to. So I'm sort of advocating for choice, whatever the choice might be. The choice might be to remember when I was at the beach when I was a little girl with my family. That's a choice. It makes a difference to me, right? So lots of choices. Yes, I used that one intentionally because it's so different from the things we usually get to hear about, but there are lots of very different things we can consider. So I want to pause there for a moment and ask people to take a deep breath. What I just shared with you is big, in my view. I think each one of those areas, the area of purpose beyond self, the area of connection, the area of choice, I would say they're even bigger than big. Maybe I put them in the realm of enormous. And there are lots and lots of things that can be folded into them. But just realizing these are some areas that I might want to pay attention to. How do these things work in my life? What are things I can do to strengthen them? They actually strengthen our capacity to be more resilient or to make our journey one that feels more sustainable to us within our own hearts and minds. I'm a little bit tempted to go to Q&A right now, but I don't want to totally. do that now, because then I think we'll miss trying out a few practices. So what I'd like to do, as you can well imagine from what I've just said to you, I hope you can imagine this. At least you can hear that I just said these are really big areas in my mind. And clearly I'm not going to show you a million ways to do all these things. So I'd like to just show you one or two. They'd be practices you can try out while you're sitting here, and you can try them out later today. Anything I show anyone in any of my classes, and I know for sure there's one person here that's been in one of my classes, I always say, I can't tell you what's going to work for you. I absolutely don't know. And if I'm showing you something you haven't done before, you don't know. You have to try it out and see for yourself. So I can show you one or two things. If they feel okay to you, you can try them out while we're here in our I'm going to call this a class, our session here right now. So while you're here in class with me, you can try these out on your own, see how they feel. If it feels like something, that might be helpful, you can try it out on your own when we're done. You try a few times and then say that actually works for me. I want to do that a little more. Or I don't like that one, not going to do that one again. That's good. I want you to really think of the word discernment. I want to ask you, always discern as best you can what works for you. What works for you. And I think that's true for all of us in everything, but I certainly think it's true in this stuff. Okay. So I was sort of pondering which practices to show you, only because I know we've got time limits. I want to respect them and be careful with them. What I normally start with in my classes, no matter what we're going to go into, understanding that in my 8-week-long course, I always start with one thing, though. I start with teaching people some grounding practices. And I'd like to do that today. And then the other two things I was thinking of is possibly an intention practice and a gratitude practice. And I know we all know how to say thank you. And I bet some of the people right in this class right now already have a gratitude practice. I think that's great. But I'd like to at least introduce another way of doing it. Might be the same way you're already doing, if we have time. So I want to be careful with grounding, because I can spend the rest of our time together just showing you grounding practices. There are many, many, many of them. So I'm going to show you a few. And what I would like you to do with your discernment is see if there's one that appeals to you that you might want to practice, after class is over. Practice during class, and then after class is over, that one. You don't have to pick them all. Pick one if you feel like it. And then after that, we'll try the intention practice. And then after that, the gratitude. That's my game plan right now. Any quick questions from anyone?
Yeah, you can. One of the things that everyone can do is put your questions in the chat.
Oh, good.
And
Thank
the
you,
other
Rick.
thing you can do, if you're in the audience, which almost all of you are, is at the bottom of the screen, you'll see where it says reactions, the little smiley face. You can raise your hand.
Oh.
It just flags to Judy and to me that you want to say something or ask something. And I think based on how Judy has done this class before, if people have any questions now, it would be fine to ask them. You just need to unmute yourself in order to ask them. And of course, not speak over anyone else.
And also, please understand if you do it, I would love to hear any questions now, but I might keep my answers relatively abbreviated so we have time to do some of the practices. But that said, anybody? Rick, if I cannot see someone's picture on the screen and they raise their hand, how would we know?
Oh, you would see, let me show you. I'll raise my hand now.
Yeah, but you're on my screen, I can see you.
The hand will still show.
Oh, by itself?
Yeah, just by itself, right.
Okay.
And whatever their name is.
Okay, Thank you. I'm just cracking a silly joke, sorry.
No.
My husband always says I have a terrible sense of humor, or at least he thinks he laughs. Never mind, we'll stop there. Okay, so grounding.
How about this, folks? If go down to reactions, and if you can see where it says raise hands and all kinds of icons, if you could do a practice thumbs up, just to make sure it works for you. And the little, all thumbs up. Yeah, there, there we go. People are starting to do that.
So the place where I see that is in my participant screen, right?
In the participant screen, yes, you'll see it in the participant
Oh, I see. Or
screen
it's in the
or
icon.
in the gallery view.
Okay. Yeah, except you took me out of gallery view, I think.
Yeah.
I could go back to gallery view. Ah, now I see everybody. Oh, this is great. Much better. Okay, thank you. I heard you say you were spotlighting me, and I thought that meant that I couldn't see everybody, but now I can. So if I'm in gallery view, anyone without your video on, if you feel comfortable putting your video on, I love to see faces. If you don't feel comfortable, it's totally fine. But I just wanted to invite that if you wish to, because before I was only seeing 4 of you. It's nice to see people here. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to dive in, and I don't see any raised hands. I will dive in and ask, tell you what I mean when I'm talking about grounding and where it came from, where I got this from. So this is a practice. Sorry, I'm turning my heater off. Yeah, this is a practice that I learned from some people that are trauma therapists. And it was part of a chaplaincy course I was taking, and they were teaching us particular practices they used with trauma clients. And some of you may be psychologists or trauma therapists yourselves, I don't know. So this is one version of it that I learned from these particular people. And they said these were practices they use when someone that they're talking to is feeling upset by recounting their traumatic history. And I'm seeing a hand up. I want to just check in to make sure it's someone that can hear me. And it's Terry Turner. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question, Terry?
You hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
My question is, often we get in contact with people that you haven't seen for a while. I mean, in months or years. And I've been 10 years diagnosed with Parkinson's. How much do you want to tell them, or do you want to tell them at all? Because it then just evolves in a long story, as opposed to just letting them know that, I may do some things differently because of the disease.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And you said something I thought was very, well, first of all, there's not one answer.
Yeah.
I'm guessing everyone knows that it's going to depend on something you said. Do you wanna? So it's what you want to do. Number 2, it's what's your relationship with that person? What are they like? How do you feel? How comfortable do you feel talking about these things? Is it someone you want to know? If I were to generalize, though, here's what I would say. I think it's very helpful to another person, whether it's a brother or sister, a sibling, someone you've known for years, or whether it's someone that is a friend you haven't seen for many years, to be, and this is an opinion, this is my opinion. I think that being as transparent as we can makes me feel more comfortable. Usually it makes me and them both feel more comfortable. And then containing it in a very simple way. You don't need to get into the whole history of what happened and how you got it, how it's changed over the years. You can just keep it very simple. And then if you feel that you want to have a more in-depth conversation with this person because your relationship with them warrants that and you'd like to, that can come after. But you can just say, hey, I just wanted you to know, I know we haven't seen each other for a long time. I now have Parkinson's disease. And the way I just want you to be aware, the way it's affecting me right now is it's causing me to sometimes blank, whatever your particular symptoms are that you want to be able to share. And say, I'm still really glad to see you. We can have a great conversation. I'm glad you're here. But I just wanted you to know that so that, you would be comfortable if you see something that's not exactly how I used to look before. And then we can talk later if you want to talk more about it. Meanwhile, how are you doing? How are your kids? That's probably how I go with it. Yeah, thanks. And again, I just want to make it really clear. It doesn't mean that's the only or right answer. It's just what I would do. But it is based. I have found I'm more comfortable if I'm very open about things. I'm much less comfortable if I'm not. Then I'm trying to keep something, I don't know, covered up or hidden, and I may not be able to. And then I'm uncomfortable about that. Yeah. I will share with all of you, I've told people this sometimes when they see me in person. I have a balance disability. I don't have Parkinson's. So it was nerve damage, but I have a very definite balance disability. So I take care. I've learned to adapt. I do pretty well. Sometimes, however, it kicks in. So I'll tell you a funny story very briefly. Promise not to take all our time with it. I was giving a talk once to a room full of neurologists who were movement disorders neurologists. And they didn't know me very well. The person that had hired me knew me, but she wasn't there. She was on, this was pre-COVID. She was on a phone call into us, but she wasn't there in person, so she couldn't see us. So I'm there with this room full of people sitting around kind of a square group of tables. And I realized I wanted something in my handbag or my pack, whatever I had with me that day. I couldn't quite reach it. So I reached over the edge of my chair to grab it, and I wasn't quite balanced. And I fell on the floor. I fell on my back, right? I thought it was hilarious because I thought, this is too funny. Here I am falling on my back in front of all these neurologists. That's funny. But they're all going, oh my gosh, are you okay? And they were so worried. And even the person that knew me well, that had hired me, she said, Judy, are you okay? And I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was super funny. But I find it made me more comfortable that they knew what was there. And I find I was teaching some other classes down at Stanford, and they were just the general public coming in to teach a class I was teaching then, not this class, but something called compassion cultivation training. And it was kind of a nice class. I like teaching it. But sometimes there were doctors there. Sometimes there was just somebody that lived down the street. I always let them know when I first came in, hey, just wanted to let you know, have a balance disability. I don't want you to be startled if I stumble or something. I'm totally feel comfortable with it, but I want you to know that so you won't worry. And then that kind of diffused everything after that. It was fine. So that's kind of in the same realm. So I hope you don't mind my taking a little longer with that, Terry, but I think that's...
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, I don't, to get me back so I'm not overriding you, do I click?
I'm not sure I got all that, but okay. Did you have more to say?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay. So back to grounding. Here's why I like it, and here's how it works. I like it because if I notice when I'm becoming stressed, preferably sooner rather than later, right, at the very beginning of starting to feel a little bit stressed, if I do one of these practices, I can kind of calm my nervous system if I want to. In other words, interrupt the stress response. So let's pause for a moment. Stress response, actually, there are many ways that the stress response works, not just fight, flight, freeze. The one we're most familiar with hearing about is fight, flight, freeze. Can you raise your hand if you've heard of that before? Is that common knowledge? Fight, flight, freeze. It's like, yeah, I get stressed and my brain does this good work of saying, I want to keep Judy safe. I think I'll flood her with some adrenaline into her bloodstream, and that's going to make her heart start pounding faster and her breath come faster, and that'll help her get out of danger in a hurry. So the intention, the biological intention, is to keep us safe. It's not to make us crazy, right? But in real life, my brother can be on the phone with me and he can say something to me that I think is irritating, and I can still have that same response. I'm not in any danger at all. I'm just angry with my brother and upset about what he's saying, and my heart starts beating faster and my breath comes. So in our modern world, we sometimes have this kind of a stress response that was intended to keep us physically safe, even when what's happening, the only danger is that I don't like what somebody said to me. You know, that maybe my self-image is being threatened, not my physical safety. So if I'm being flooded with adrenaline, what do I do with that? Suppose I don't need to get in a fight or run away. What do I do with all that adrenaline? It's there. It's in my body. I'm stuck. I don't like it. I wish I could. I can't wave a magic wand. I need to give it a little bit of time, right, to dissipate. And if I want to give my body time to allow the adrenaline to dissipate, I better be thinking about something other than the fact that I'm so angry with my brother, right? If I go back to thinking about the same thing I'm upset about, my brain's just going to say, whoops, you're still in danger. Here's some more adrenaline. I'm sure that'll help you out, right? But if I want my brain to chill, I want it to stop doing that, I need to, 1, interrupt. Number 2, turn my mind to something else. That's a very different thing than what I usually tell people about almost everything else. But when it comes to interrupting the stress response, I find it very handy to distract my mind with something that is that I like, that's pleasant, that doesn't dump me right back into the mind trap that got me into the adrenaline flooding to begin with, right? I don't want to go back to the problem. Think about it later when I'm calm. I'm not going to think about it right now while I'm upset. My experience, and you can look at the color of my hair, I've got a lot of experience. My experience tells me if I start trying to solve problems while I'm upset, I usually don't get very far. So why don't I wait till I calm down? I want to give this adrenaline time to dissipate. So I want to show you a couple of ways you can interrupt the stress. And one way is a way you can also calm down. And you can use them using your discernment when and how you think is appropriate and okay for you. It's 12:30 now. I promised that at 12:45 we'd have time for questions. We may only do the grounding today. That's okay. But I think it'd be fun. So here's how I am taught by trauma therapists that this works. If I want to give the part of my brain that floods me with adrenaline, if I want to give that part of my brain a message that says I'm safe right now, the best way to do it is by something that I can feel in my body, a physical sensation. That part of my brain doesn't do very well with words. You know how we say with small children, we should say, use your words, use your words. Well, in this case, using our words doesn't work. If I use my words to try to get my brain, the part of my brain that responds to threats, to settle down, it doesn't get words. It gets being able to have me feel in my body a physical sensation that it can go, oh, Judy's okay. I get it. Here's what I'd like you to try out if this is comfortable for you. So people that are off the screen, I don't know if you're standing or lying down or if you're walking, or if you're sitting down. So I will say, and actually even to the people in front of me, this is something that can be done with no matter what body position you're in, but the idea is to notice the support of whatever is beneath you, beneath your body, right? You could feel that anyway, right? I've been sitting in a chair the whole time I'm talking with you. I have not paid any attention to the support of anything. But if I want to, I can shift my attention to my body, notice the sensation, physical sensation of the support of the bottom of the chair beneath my sit bones. Try it. Try it right now. And if you're not sure what the heck is she talking about, I would invite you to sway just a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, just so you can kind of notice, oh yeah, I get it. I can feel the chair beneath my sit bones. I call them sit bones. You might call them buttocks, whatever, beneath your butt. So can you feel the support of the chair? That's what I want you to notice. Right? So this is not complicated, but it's not what we usually do. So I want you to really notice the sensation, a physical sensation of being supported by the chair. If you were lying down, and by the way, I taught this to a lovely gentleman that really liked doing this. He could not sit up. He had to be lying down. So he would notice the support of the mattress beneath his back, the pillows beneath his head and shoulders, right? So you can just use whatever you're resting on. And I also know a doctor that used to use this when he would walk between patients' rooms. So he would use the soles of his feet and the support of the floor beneath his feet. But it's that shifting of your attention to noticing the physical. I'm really emphasizing that word on purpose. I want you to notice the physical sensation of the support of whatever it is you're leaning on. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to do it again. And this time I'm going to ask you to sustain it just for a second. You don't need to do this long to give your brain the message. You just need to do it. So again, when you're ready right now, see if you can drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of whatever it is you're sitting or leaning on. Let your attention sustain there for a second. Okay, that's it. Now, if you like, you could combine that with a breath. You don't have to, but you can. It's kind of like it's what some people would call a twofer. You get the benefit of two practices at once. Some people don't like to notice the breath. They find that challenging. So if you don't like to notice the breath, you could skip this part. If you don't mind noticing the breath, then try it out. It works like this. If your nose is clear, I'd like you to, when you breathe in, to breathe in through your nostrils. If your nose is not clear, you can use your mouth and throat, but I'm just going to say breathe in. So On the next in-breath, would you please breathe in and notice the physical sensation, using the same wording. Notice the physical sensation of the air entering your nostrils or your mouth. Okay, try it once again. On the next in-breath, notice the physical sensation of the air entering your nostrils or your mouth. Let the out-breath take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair or whatever you're on. So it's a little like patting your belly and rubbing your head, feels like, but it's really sequential. You do one thing, then the second thing. So do it again. I'll walk you through it again. Breath first, drop into your body. Notice the sensation of what you're leaning on after that, or what's supporting you. So just breathe normally, breathe out. On the next in-breath, notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils or mouth. Out breath, let it take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair or bed or floor. That's the whole thing. Can you do it while you're in a doctor's office talking to them? Yes. Nobody knows you're doing it. And in fact, I was teaching this to some ICU nurses down at Stanford. And one of them said, Judy, what do I do if I walk into the ICU cubicle and the family's in there and they're yelling at me? You think that's ever happened? I bet it has. That's probably why she asked. I didn't answer her. The other nurses did. I said, you just do it again. No one knows you're doing it. Just do it again. It's a great way to kind of settle things a little bit right while you're in the middle of stuff. Questions about that one before I go to the next couple that are much faster to teach. By the way, it took me 5 minutes to explain it. You can do that on one breath, right? You breathe in, you drop into your body, done. So it's quick to do. Don't be fooled by how long it takes me to explain it. That's just so you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So in the last 5 minutes, I'd like to tell you of one breathing exercise and one visualization. A quick one. Okay. So for the breathing exercise, this was taught to me by a scientist who has studied one of the nerves that goes from the brain into the body and wraps around our internal organs. For those of you in the room here, in our Zoom room, who are biologists, you probably know this nerve. It's called the vagus nerve. It's a very powerful nerve that gets involved whenever we are responding to threats. And this particular scientist, Stephen Porges, has studied the vagus nerve for his whole career. And I think he's about my age. So he studied it pretty thoroughly, and he's written a lot about it. He said, when we breathe in a particular way, we impact the vagus nerve. And when we impact the vagus nerve, that in turn will re-engage the part of the nervous system that is dominant when we're relaxed. It's called the parasympathetic, for those of you that are science family, part of the science family in the classroom. But the important thing to realize is that when we breathe in this way, we'll re-engage the part of our nervous system that is more resilient and more even-keeled. And it's pretty fast, but it does require being aware of how fast you breathe in and how fast you breathe out. And so I'm only going to ask you to do this for 60 seconds, 1 minute, because it's not our normal breath. I'm not saying breathe like you always do. I'm going to say breathe in this particular way. And there are lots of, lots of iterations, lots of different ways of doing the same practice. But from the scientist that studied, he said, in truth, all you need to do is have your out breath be equal in length to your in breath, and it still works. So it doesn't have to be really protracted. But when I learned it from him, I was in a big lecture hall, and a whole room of scientists except me. I think I was sitting there, and he said, hey, I can tell you how to calm yourself really fast. I want you to breathe in for 4 and out for 8 and do it about 5 times, and I'll count. That's what he said. And I thought, oh, this is going to be good. But it actually is surprisingly useful, really works quite well. And I can tell you some iterations, but let's just try that one. In for 4 and out for 8. That means your out breath is pretty long. If that feels too long to you, please moderate it. You could do in for 2 and out for 4. in for 3 and out for 6. Or, as Stephen Porges says, as long as they're equal, you could breathe in for 1 and out for 1, but make sure that out breath is at least equal in length to the in breath, at least. Okay. I'll try it with you with the 4 and 8. Raise your hand if that sounds terrible, if that sounds too long. Let me know that. Does that sound too long? Okay. How about 2 and 4? Raise your hand if that sounds too long. 2 and 4 sounds okay. Okay, we're going to do 2 and 4. So we're going to do more than 5, because probably 2 and 4, to get to 60 seconds, we might need to do that 8 times, I'm guessing. I have my clock. We'll see. Okay. So when you're ready, just breathe out normally. If you, again, I will just say, in case you didn't tell me, if you don't like noticing the breath, if that's challenging, skip this one. Really mean it. Use your discernment, your good judgment for that. Okay, so breathe out. When you're ready, I'll count. Please go. In, 1, 2, out, 2, 3, 4. 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 Last one. In, 1, 2, out, 2, 3, and 4. That's it. That's the whole thing. So I should have said, well, first, any questions or difficulties with that or challenges that anyone wants me to know? Okay. So play with it. See how it works for you. I will tell you, I was teaching this once to some hospice nurses. And what I didn't know is they had had a really difficult day. And before the time that I was seeing them, which was around 5 in the evening, one of their patients had been hallucinating and had gotten a hold of some chemicals that should never have been anywhere near him and had thrown them at the nurses. And they were okay. They were safe, but they were still upset and they were still angry. And I didn't know this, right? I'm just teaching them this thing. But when I taught them that particular practice, one of them looked at me and said, that worked. And it was the first time that I saw her shoulders come down from the time I'd seen her, at 5 o'clock. So it really can be powerful. I hope you didn't even quite notice how it felt to you, because I hope you're not feeling very stressed right now. But there it is. I sometimes use this one at silly times, pre-COVID. If I was in an airport, I find the noise really stressful. I don't like waiting for anything. I don't like waiting for baggage. I don't like waiting for my plane. I would just do that. And it would just quiet me down. I like doing it. So it's a useful one for that reason. And we're at 12:45. I think I'll just throw in this last one because I really like it. And I can tell you it pretty fast, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. Would that be okay? Everybody? Okay. So this last one is called the heart breath. And remember, you choose for yourself what works for you, what you want to practice. But the heart breath has been extensively studied over the last 25 years as a biofeedback technique. And it's been found that when we imagine, so this is not the real breath, we imagine that we could breathe into our heart or our chest area, think of it however you like. Imagine that we're breathing into our heart and out from our heart, and continue at our own natural rhythm, however fast your breath happens to be happening at the moment, but just do it for a while. When we continue to do that, it optimizes the way that the breath and the heartbeat are synchronized. They're not the same. They're not supposed to be, but apparently they can be optimally synchronized. And when they are, then the same thing happens that happens with the other practices. It re-engages the parasympathetic nervous system. So it brings us into that more resilient zone where the part of the nervous system that's dominant is the part that's more at ease. I like combining this heart breath with the counted breath. So for example, if I wake up in the middle of the night, perfectly innocent, wake up to pee, get back in bed, I think I'm going to sleep, but my mind starts spinning because I'm worried about something. Has anyone ever done that? Am I the only one? Yeah, seeing some smiles. So if that happens, then I like doing the counted breath. You know why? Because if I'm counting, that's what my mind's doing. And I'm not worrying about anything. I'm counting, right? But after I've finished counting, then what? Right? Then I like going to the heart breath. So that gives me something to do. That's going to be calming. I don't worry about, can I go to sleep? Can I not? My only job is to bring my attention back to my heart. My mind wanders, bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back. It's not exciting, kind of boring, but it can be really remarkably calming. Sometimes I don't notice the calm for a little while. I'm just doing it. I think this works. Well, I'll do it anyway. And then I'll sort of feel an ease come about. All I can say is play with it and see. But let's try it out quickly now. So if you would, please, maybe allow your eyes to gently close so you're not distracted by faces on the screen. And go ahead and put one or both hands over your heart area, the center of your chest, which, by the way, has a benefit of its own. But you don't need to do this, but I find it's always helpful in the beginning because it reminds me that what I want to do is keep my attention focused inside my chest where my heart is. So imagine inside your chest where your heart is. When you breathe in, notice your chest expanding. When you breathe out, notice your chest relaxing. And now just imagine that when you breathe in, regardless of the biology, just imagine that you could breathe into your heart and out from your heart. And into your heart and out from your heart. And then please continue for about 5 breaths on your own. Just try it out. Notice where your mind is. If your mind has wandered, that's very natural. Just say, okay, that's okay. But for right now, I'll set that down and come back. Come back to where your heart is. Breathe into your heart, out from your heart. And when you're ready, if you could allow your eyes to open if they were closed. Put your hand down if you like. And I'd say, I was just doing this last night in the middle of the night. It's very helpful. I don't try to go back to sleep. I never tried to. I found that if I try to go back to sleep, guess what happens? I stay awake. I don't go to sleep. But if I just do this, then I might get relaxed enough. I might doze off. I might not. And if I don't go back to sleep, I know that I still feel rested. So it's a good one. You can just try it out and see. So thank you so much. I see it's 10 to 1. I want to be respectful of your time, but I'm happy to answer questions for now.
When you want to ask a question, simply remember to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Yeah. You don't have to have questions. If you have any, you're fine.
Well, I noticed, one thing while people are thinking about it, you'd mentioned 3 parts of resiliency: purpose, connection, and choice.
Yeah.
Can you comment a little bit more about purpose?
When I'm teaching it, I teach purpose in several different ways, but I think of it really as coming down to having a purpose in our own lives that's for the greater good, however we interpret that. For example, for some people, it might be the work that they went into. For some people, it may be what they do at home with their families. For some people, it may be just having a sense of the greater good. But this purpose that is, we can have all kinds of purposes and intentions. I can have an intention to raise my shoulder, right? That comes with an intentions are helpful. We have intentions. But when I have an intention that's part of who I am, that has to do with the good of others, that's a very particular type of intention. It's very different than my intention to eat chocolate ice cream, which there's nothing wrong with my doing. I love chocolate ice cream, but that's a different kind of intention than my intention for the good of others. And it's been, interestingly, I'm not sure if this would be what you want to be hearing about right now, Rick, but I'll just share that it's been interesting to me that this has been studied by psychologists who do research in positive psychology, and it's been studied by scientists who study genetic transcription factors. And in fact, they partnered in a study to say, is this good for people, this purpose beyond self? And how is it good for people? How does it show up in their bloodstream, in their heartbeat, and all those kinds of things? And the scientist, the guy at UCLA, and I know he's a good scientist, so I had to believe him, he said he expected that it would be beneficial to people psychologically and emotionally. That didn't surprise him at all. What surprised him is that it was also beneficial to people physically, physiologically. And I thought that was intriguing. And in fact, he also said to a friend of mine, because she's a global environmentalist, so they had to have this conversation about all this. And the two of them decided between them, from the science of it, that you really can't be altruistic or do something for the good of others without it also benefiting you, which is a good thing. And when I thought about it, I thought, why would that be? Why would we have evolved in that way? I thought, actually, it makes a lot of sense. Really? When I take care of someone else, it's good for the whole species, right? It's good for everyone. It's good for humankind. It's helped us to survive over the millennia. So it makes sense that when I do something for someone else, my body rewards me. It says, good job. You're doing the right thing. I'm not sure that answers your question. That's what comes to my mind.
It's a great answer.
Okay.
We have here in the chat another question from Lisa. It says, I'd love to hear about the other two pieces we didn't get to cover, intention and gratitude.
Okay.
Is there a handout or somewhere else we can learn about those pieces? Thanks.
Good question. Do you have, I'm not sure I have one on intention because I've drawn that from a number of resources. I have to think about it. Gratitude for sure. They've both been heavily studied. When I think of gratitude, first of all, what I just shared with you is intention. But the practice that I teach in class is what I just taught with you. I ask people to do an exercise where they just take a little time to remember, what is my real intention? Why am I really here? What do I really care about? That's what the intention one is. There's some practices you can do on a daily basis. I'm pausing for a moment because I just taught that right before I came into this class. I thought, did I already teach this to you? No, I didn't. That was the hour before. Do you have a place where you post things, Rick?
Well, we have a website where we can hang, different PDFs. If you send us a copy of something or a link to a website, we can post either on our website. So when we post this video, we can also post resources that you might have. We'll put them on the website and then people can download those or look at them and learn from them.
Hey, let me think about it, which things, because usually in my class, I would just write up a summary and give that to people. So that's not quite the same. For gratitude practice, backing up to that, it's been heavily studied. There is a researcher who is really specialized in it at the University of California, Davis, named Bob Emmons. And he also has taught within within the University of California at Berkeley in their Greater Good Science Center, which, by the way, might be something you could also, I'll give you a few resources to post, Rick, maybe not immediately, but within the week. And he has some gratitude practices there that you can read through and see how they look to you. And if there are any specifically you'd like to practice. I could say a lot more about it, but we don't have the time. We just have a couple of minutes. And here's what I'll do. I'll write it down that I'm going to send you these resources. Otherwise, I totally won't remember. So, okay.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we put these in the description of the YouTube video when we post this YouTube video. So when people go to this video, they don't have to necessarily watch the whole thing, but they can click on links. Now we have another hand up from Janice and Derek Ransley.
Okay, and 1 second before Janice and Derek speak, I just want to remember this. I might send you a PDF of a wellness practice journal that I've put together that I give out sometimes in my classes. And I'll give an instruction. It just has 1 or 2 instructions on the first 2 pages. And it tells you about the intention practice or maybe just the instruction pages, whatever it is. I'll send you something and they'll give you a practice you can just do. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Practice. Yeah. And now I'm sorry, Janice and Derek. Yeah.
You have to unmute yourself, Janice.
Thank you, Judy, for your talk.
Yeah.
Is there a way to quantitate resilience? Is it an all or none thing? And
I love your question. I'm just laughing because it's such a good question. And I'm also remembering that sometimes people will say, well, you teach this course. How do you know if it actually helps people's resilience? Are you measuring it somehow? What are you doing? So there are scales to measure it. I don't know if I think they're the greatest. You said something right at the end that I wanted to respond to. What did you say last?
a way to quantitate it. I'm not sure.
You said something else.
Is it a balance? I'm not sure if I said this.
I'm remembering. I think I'm remembering. Like, do we have it anyway? Something like that. So I think that's what you said. I'm not. If it's not, is that okay? Is that sort of what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay. I think what's really intriguing is that it's one of these things. Unless we have a handicap of some sort, a deficit, we all have resilience. It's hardwired. It's how we've survived. We have this capacity. Our natural world has this capacity. All the things we worry about in the environment have a remarkable capacity to be resilient. So do we. It can be harmed. It can be damaged. It can be less strong at birth than from one person to another. It can be more strong from one person to another. But we've got these natural capacities. So some people don't feel like they've got very much, and it really is helpful to them to build it. We can teach it. People can learn it. They can grow it. I could say so much more, but I don't want to sidetrack us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it tells me that you really can't quantitate it.
You can measure a little bit if someone has it. There are measures. For example, there's a measure out of Duke that is it's one of those surveys or scales that says on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you feel this way? How much do you feel that way? And it's a validated measure. So the people that designed it tested it and said, does this work? And theoretically, that measures people's resilience. And for example, you could give them this measure before they learn something and after they learn something to see if their resilience increased. So you could quantify it that way if that answers your question. But it's not hard science.
It seems that to me that a lot of the time it's a judgment. I mean, people say that person is resilient or that person isn't resilient. It's sort of like whether you're kind or not. There's an element of where it's an assessed value.
So in the sense that you're describing it, I really like the word discernment. Although I appreciate what you're saying. This discernment could be the same as judgment, right? But I think of discernment as being just a little bit more like, what do I observe here? What am I seeing? It's not like you're resilient and you're not, you're kind and you're not. Just, because then we get into this thing that we all do, right? The comparing mind. Sometimes that can cloud the field of what we're looking at and make it less clear. Where if we're just discerning and noticing something, then it leaves the space open a little bit more, I think.
Right.
And I don't mean to be judging the word judgment, but I'm just saying, we can open the field a little bit more in our own minds and hearts. Thank you for bringing that up. That's such important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sarah Allen, thank you for your comment in the chat. I wish I'd known these techniques the last 70 years too. It's like, why don't we teach these things to kids in kindergarten? This is like very, very useful stuff. Yeah, I see someone has a 1 o'clock and I know I need to be respectful. Any last minute questions from anyone? Okay.
I'm curious, Judy, in your experience as a chaplain, what do you find, how often do you find people's faith to be an integral part of their ability to bounce back, as you put it?
Well, a quick answer would be this. It varies, of course, and I'm sure you would expect that. Depends on how they hold their faith tradition. I've been surprised that a lot of times doctors or nurses will say, well, that person is religious, they're fine. Mm-hmm. And that's actually not true. Some people feel that they've been abandoned when they have a very difficult diagnosis.
Sure.
So it doesn't necessarily support them. I would say their faith community almost always supports them. And that is such an important way of getting support and,
Yes.
and countering isolation. And actually, the religions themselves are usually always supportive. I'm just saying, whether or not someone's connection with their religion, whether they feel it supports them, can be varied, very varied. Good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about your question earlier was, where do you get your strength?
Mhm.
Where do you get your strength to bounce back in difficult situations? And I'd like to quote a verse in the Bible that I rely on. It says, I can do all things through him, through Christ who strengthens me. And if I really believe that, if I have faith in that, it works. I'm able to bounce back.
Yeah. So you're
He
talking
also, Paul says in the same book in Philippians, I have learned to be content in whatever my circumstances. And that's a big issue for people too. They have to learn
Yes, it is.
to have enough faith that they can be content and
And that-
know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to just open that field to everyone, even if you don't feel connected with religion. I think these qualities of your mindset, your attitude toward what's happening can make all the difference. And what is it that strengthens that for you? And in your case, do I call you Lester? Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So in Lester's case, it very definitely is scripture. For someone else, it may be something different. It may be going to the ocean and watching the waves. It's going to vary for different people. But I think these ideas of what is it that provides a foundation for me, makes me feel safe, and gives me the confidence to continue forward is really important. So thank you very much for lifting that up. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I guess on that note, it's a great note to thank people, be gracious and full of gratitude for this talk on gratitude, among other things.
I'm grateful to all of you.
It's been a fabulous journey for this hour. We will post this online on our website within 48 hours. If you're a subscriber to the PNMD YouTube channel, you'll be notified as soon as it's uploaded. And Judy, I would just like to thank you in a heartfelt way. I'll do my heart breaths during and after this.
Do it while.
For a while, yes. Well, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of PNMD, thanks again.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you to every one of you that's taken your time to be here with me. It's been just a real joy to me. So.